What's up everybody, this is Master EN Gamer. BlizzConline revealed a ton of new information for Overwatch 2, including a bunch of new details specifically regarding the PvE portion of Overwatch's upcoming sequel. So in this video, I'm going to be covering all the specific details we learned when it comes to individual hero talents revealed, new enemy PvE units, PvE mission map redesigns and objectives, and even what sounds like dynamic hero relationships that develop as you play through story missions. There is a ton of really interesting information I have to cover in this video, so if you end up enjoying it, be sure to subscribe and hit that like button, and otherwise, let's jump right on in. So first up, I want to cover the general information we learned about hero missions, which is that Blizzard anticipates there being literally hundreds of different missions for us to play on. Now, when they say hundreds of unique missions, what it seems they're actually implying is there are hundreds of combinations when it comes to the map you're playing on, the characters you play as, the enemies you're playing against, and the objective you're actually trying to achieve on that mission. They specified that all the existing Overwatch maps will be available in PvE mission modes, and on top of that, every map will be expanded to include new routes, locations, and side areas in order to actually expand the size of the map itself, and thus allow for more variety in the types of missions you can actually conduct there. One of the specific maps they even mentioned was King's Row, and how they opened up this whole new side area near the attacker's first spawn, which has its own street, buildings, and locations that you can explore and do different things in. And on top of just physically expanding the maps, they also specified that there will be day, night, and dusk versions of every single map, thus adding even more variety when it comes to playing out any given mission, in addition to weather effects like rain, snow, sandstorms, etc., which seem to be functioning on some sort of dynamic system where the entire mission could take place during a blizzard, or it might randomly start raining halfway through the mission, or maybe there won't be any weather at all and it'll be a clear and sunny day. All these details are intended to make each individual mission feel unique from ones you've played before, and thus vastly increase the replayability of the PvE game modes. However, beyond just cosmetic and map layouts, they also mentioned that there will be a number of different objective types when it comes to playing the PvE. While they didn't specify any exact number of different objectives we could play, they did mention ones ranging from gathering canisters and bringing them back to a central point in a sort of scavenger hunt-esque game mode, a wall of death game mode where you're forced to move from one position to another while a massive death wall pursues you, kill quests where the objective seems to just be killing a certain number of enemies, or perhaps even a certain number of a certain type of enemies, payload escorts, which presumably will work like the already existing PvP escort missions, objective protection, where you have to protect a specific objective from being destroyed by the enemy, and objective reaching missions, where you seemingly just have to fight your way from one point to another, much like what we saw with the Rio mission demo back at BlizzCon 2019. This wide variety of different possible mission objectives in combination with the multitude of maps and different layouts for each individual map are what's seemingly going to make it so that there are hundreds of different missions you can potentially go on, and thus the mode overall will be incredibly replayable. But beyond just the maps and objectives being unique and different, they also talked about a number of new PvE enemies that we're going to end up encountering on these missions. While we already saw a number of them again at BlizzCon 2019 when we had the playable demo, they also mentioned a number of new types we hadn't seen before, so I'm real quickly just going to run through each of the specific enemy types they specifically mentioned in the BlizzCon Overwatch 2 panel. The first enemy they showed off was the Breacher, which is essentially a walking bomb that just walks towards the objective you're trying to protect and attempts to detonate on it. Seemingly, this is very similar to the detonator unit we saw in the Archives Uprising mission, where they would essentially just slowly float towards the payload and try to explode. Likewise, the next enemy they showed off was the Slicer, which again we've seen previously in the Uprising PvE mission, and based on what little was shown of them from the BlizzCon panel, they seem to function pretty similar to their Uprising counterparts. The first wholly new enemy they showed off was this flying unit, which drops a deadly smoke field that expands and forces the player to reposition themselves so they don't get caught in it. It's not really specified whether you can destroy the device that emits the smoke cloud, or if you just have to stay stay away from it until it times out or something, but it definitely seems like this is going to be an area denial focused enemy who forces the player to reposition themselves into likely unadvantageous positions. The next new enemy they talked about appears to be almost some sort of mini-boss, which is the Puller. This was specifically described as being a very spooky enemy who emits creepy noises and has a somewhat weird Medusa-esque look to her. Her main function appears to be possessing a tractor beam which slowly pulls the player in towards her, and if she successfully pulls them all the way in, they get insta-killed. Another PvE enemy they showed off is the Artillery, which is actually one we saw in the BlizzCon 2019 Rio PvE mission. However, it's evidently undergone some slight visual changes in order to better convey the destructibility of its cannons, and overall appears to have adopted some new tactics in order to be a more posing threat against the player. Beyond just these sort of main special units though, Blizzard did also mention that there would be elite units, which are essentially super strong versions of these standard grunt enemies, who not only have more health and deal more damage, but also have unique abilities, such as, for example, when they die, there's a chance that instead of outright dying, they'll drop to the ground and actually try to crawl towards the player before exploding, thus posing an additional challenge after you've otherwise seemingly killed them. Now, while these were all the PvE enemies they specifically talked about, we did actually get a sneak peek of yet another PvE enemy, which appears to be some sort of weird spider-like clawed Omnic. We basically just see this one quick animation of it here at the beginning of the panel, and it's never specifically talked about, but it does look pretty cool and very, very deadly, so I am super interested in seeing how this thing ends up being implemented into the PvE missions. On top of just showing off specific enemies though, they also talked about the different mechanics they introduced to help make these enemies feel very interesting to play against. Most notably, they talked about how the enemies actually react to each other. So if you shoot one specific Omnic, it'll fall backwards a bit and actually bump into the other enemies, which could actually potentially disrupt them if they're attempting to move or perform some sort of action, and overall just makes the enemies feel more realistic in how they interact with not only the player specifically, but also each other. It was even shown that some enemies can accidentally fire off a shot after you kill them, which can actually kill other enemies as well, with there even seemingly being a talent for McCree, which increases the chances of them misfiring like this, thus causing a big chain reaction like what we see here. And speaking of talents, this is another thing which we got a bunch of new information regarding at BlizzConline. Not only did we get a proper look at what the actual hero progressions and talent trees are going to end up looking like, but we had a number of specific talents revealed. So let's just quickly run through some of the talents that were talked about and shown off. First up, Reinhardt Frost Strike, which replaces Fire Strike and thus freezes enemies instead of just damaging them. A Reinhardt Multi-Pin Charge ability, which allows him to pin multiple targets in a single charge. A Biotic Field talent for Soldier, which causes the field to move with him instead of being in a stationary position. A Repulsor effect for the Biotic Field, which pushes enemies away from it. Junkrat being able to dual-wield grenade launchers. A Junkrat Electric Trap. A Winston Tesla Cannon Stun ability, which can actually be further improved to chain onto multiple targets and thus stun multiple enemies. Mercy being able to fire some sort of big AoE blast energy projectile, in addition to, of course, the ability to mass res at super long distance and through walls, which seemingly is a combination of multiple talents working together. And of course, McCree causing multiple enemies to all shoot each other, which is seemingly one of his talents as well. In addition to this, if we go frame by frame through the actual talent tree images we have here, we can see even more further specific ones. So I'm just real quickly going to read off each of the ones we got a sneak peek of here. For Reinhardt, Puncture. Enemies that survive pin damage take 25% more damage from all sources for 6 seconds. Shield Bash. Use primary fire while Barrier Field is active to stun all enemies directly in front of Reinhardt for 2 seconds, dealing 30 damage and pushing them backwards. Baldric Stand. After Barrier Field breaks, gain armor equal to 50% of your maximum health and deal 50% more damage for 8 seconds. Get Down. Charge's pin damage is increased by 25%, 50% when the pinned target was picked up near an ally. Armor Up. gain armor equal to 3%, 6%, or 10% of Reinhardt's maximum health. All armor converts 25%, 50%, and 75% of Reinhardt's health to armor. Fractured, enemies take 10% or 20% more damage from all sources while knocked down by Earth Shatter and stay knocked down for 15% or 30% longer. Brigitte's Weld, Reinhardt takes 3% or 6% less damage from all sources while he has armor. Overhead Smash, hitting with rocket hammer swings 2 times in a row causes the next swing to deal 25% more damage, stunning targets for 0.5 seconds. Icy Pains, charge deals 150% more pin damage to frozen enemies and keeps enemies frozen while they're pinned. And Barrier Boon, Barrier Field heals Reinhardt for 10%, 20%, or 30% of the damage it absorbs, while Barrier Field has 50% or more health. Moving on to the soldier talents, Uptake increases the healing of Biotic Field by 3%, 6%, 10%, and its range by 10%, 20%, 30%. Inexorable Trigger, Pulse Rifle deals 0.5%, 1%, 1.5% more damage for every bullet that hits an enemy while the trigger remains held. Using Helix Rockets maintains a trigger hold. Tactical Advantage, damage dealt during Tactical Visor is increased by 5%, 10%, 15%. Target-Rich Environment, eliminations while Tactical Visor is active increases the duration of Tactical Visor. Deathly Accurate, Pulse Rifle's critical hits that result in killing blows grant Pulse Rifle 5%, 10% mini-crit damage for 5 seconds. Combat Veteran, increase Soldier 76's maximum health by 12.5%, 25%. And Morale Boost. The first time Biotic Field heals an ally other than Soldier 76, its cooldown is reduced by 1.53 seconds. And we got a couple talents shown for Mercy. Rapid Response, Guardian Angel's range and movement speed are increased by 10%, 20%, 30%, and Outreach, Kadusha's staff's range is increased by 10%, 20%, 30%. Whew, so those are all the talents shown off in the BlizzConline Overwatch 2 panel. It definitely seems that Blizzard is putting an emphasis on not just having big, impactful talents like what they initially showed off back at BlizzCon 2019, but also having smaller stat-based talents, which seems like a good thing because it allows them to introduce more specific ways to upgrade a hero without needing to have some big gameplay-changing mechanic added for each and every single one of them. Now, before I wrap up this video, one final thing I wanted to mention regarding the PvE game modes they mentioned is that evidently there's going to be specific hero relationships that you can develop as you play through the PvE campaign. Now, they didn't give us much detail about this at all, and specifically they just sort of mentioned the fact that if you have heroes together on missions, it can result in them getting unique dialogue options and cutscenes and possibly even in the missions themselves. We don't know whether this is going to actually lead to any sort of difference in gameplay when it comes to like going on different missions based on who you've had sort of work together prior to that, or what sort of story implications that's going to have on a grander level. But it is interesting that Blizzard is taking the extra step to add these sort of dynamic character relationships in what otherwise I would have assumed would just be a sort of linear story for the main campaign. It's almost like a dating sim-esque mechanic where you can sort of strategically put certain characters together on missions in order to strategically develop their relationship. I don't know if there's going to be any romance factors involved. It would be interesting if they did end up adding something like that. But at the very least, it does seem like we're going to get some unique interactions and voice lines based on this mechanic. So I'm certainly interested in seeing just how in-depth this ends up being. But that does it for all the main points talked about in the BlizzConline Overwatch 2 panel when it comes to the PvE part of the game specifically. I already did a video prior to this one where I talked about all the PvP changes, including the new hero designs for heroes like McCree, Soldier 76, Reaper, Widowmaker, and Pharah. So if you want, you can check out that video, which I'll have linked in the cards on screen. And after this video, I'm planning on doing another third news coverage video where I'm going to be focusing on some of the IGN articles and other interviews which took place around BlizzCon, which actually revealed a lot of interesting information that wasn't talked about in the BlizzConline panel itself, such as as the release date for Overwatch 2, as well as what we can expect with regards to a beta. So stay tuned for that video coming soon, and again, check out my previous video if you haven't already, and otherwise, thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to let me know your thoughts on the new information we learned about Overwatch 2 by dropping a comment down below. As always, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe, follow me on Twitter, hit up that bell icon, and come join my Discord server to hang out and never miss any of my future Overwatch content. You can also support my channel by becoming a channel member by just hitting that join button down below to earn some cool rewards like getting your name shown at the end of my videos. I would super duper appreciate it if you did that, as every little bit helps me to keep putting out content. Otherwise, this is Master EN Gamer signing off, and until next time, have a great day.